Kia ora, hello, I'm Philip Duncan. It is Monday, the 6th of October. Thank you so much for joining me. Well, this week, the windy westerlies return, and in fact, they crank up further as we go into the weekend. Now, the period of time between the middle of September and the middle of October, going up to about Labour weekend, is usually our windiest and most unsettled of the year. So this is not really surprising, but I know many of you in the west are sick of the rain, and those of you in the east are sick of the dry wind. So we've got more of that on the way with temperature fluctuations as we go through the next few days or the next week ahead. Let's have a look at the satellite imagery. Plenty of cloud coming out of the Tasman, coming out of Australia. This is the next cold front sweeping through for them with a showery cold change for Tassie with thunderstorms. That is heading our way for Tuesday. Ahead of it though, we've actually got a switch to warmer winds. So at the moment, southerly winds or southwesterlies clearing across the North Island. A few showers this morning, most of those are now moving away. And in between the showers clearing the North Island and the rain band coming into the South Island, the winds are going to switch west to northwest later today and tonight, lift up the temperatures, and then that cold front comes in on Tuesday. At the moment, there is a lot of low pressure south of New Zealand and around Antarctica, while the high pressure systems are north of us, west of Australia, or well east of New Zealand. And so that is allowing these lows and the windy weather north of them to blow on through over New Zealand. So as we go into this evening, you can see what I mean. The wind's swinging up to the northwest now. That will move up the country. So areas at the top of New Zealand will notice a westerly shift tonight from the southwest, moving to the west, and then northwest by overnight tonight. But that's ahead of the cold front, which arrives in the lower South Island this evening. And then that moves up the country on Tuesday. So the polar boundary by lunchtime Tuesday goes right up into the central North Island with high pressure north of New Zealand and low pressure well down next to Antarctica or well south of New Zealand and Australia. So between the lows to our south and the highs to the north, the windy westerlies of spring, they carry on blowing across New Zealand with a cold front here clearing the top of the country as we go into the afternoon. Here is a closer view of that same map. So the cold polar boundary right up to Mount Taranaki Central Plateau. There'll be some snow on the mountains and the ranges, and colder for the entire South Island and the lower North Island. Temperatures will also drop later into Tuesday around the top of New Zealand. You'll notice it, but it won't be majorly cold. It'll be a little bit similar to what we had over the weekend for some of those northern areas. Not a massive amount of moisture around, so while some of that does fall as snow, nothing too major in there for most regions. As we go to Wednesday, first time we've seen this in a while, but some high pressure right to the top of the country around the far north and Northland pretty much fades out as you come into Auckland, Waikato and Bay of Plenty, where there is still a west to southwest breeze and a couple of isolated showers coming off the Tasman. Eastern areas and the very north are dry, and the South Island has some wet weather over on the west coast, but the westerly flow or west to northwesterly flow will keep the east dry and much of Southland as well. At the same time as these west to northwest winds pick up, the polar boundary gets pushed east of the Chatham Islands, which means the entire New Zealand area will experience temperatures going up as we go through the next couple of days. In fact, pretty much frost-free by the time we get to the middle part of just this week as these warmer winds come in. So by Thursday, the high is northeast of New Zealand, but it stretches all the way up into the tropics. And so they've got an easterly flow across Tonga, Fiji, Vanuatu, New Caledonia, and then it curves around as a northwesterly. So subtropical nor'westers for parts of New Zealand. And if you don't have the subtropical portion of it, you're still getting an airflow out of Australia, out of New South Wales or Queensland. So it is warm on Thursday around much of New Zealand with a few showers developing around the northern part of the North Island, maybe a little bit heavy as well. Otherwise dry, and some wet weather in the southern half of the west coast, and those showers and patchy rain will move further up the coast as we go into the later part of Thursday. But you can also see the next cold front coming through here into Australia. So as we go into Friday, low pressure south of Tasmania starts to deepen and churn up. We don't have high pressure over New Zealand anymore. It is off to the northeast, and the next big high way out over Alice Springs in central parts of Australia, which leaves the Tasman area and the New Zealand area a little bit vulnerable for low pressure to dominate. So windy west to northwesterlies crank up on Friday with some west coast rain. Like I say, that is moving northwards. It's a narrow area of heavy rain worth monitoring, but this far out, it could still move around a wee bit north or south. Very windy through central New Zealand and the eastern side of the North Island as we go into Friday. But like I say, it's warm for most of you. Pretty much only Stewart Island and Invercargill, Bluff are noticing that polar boundary, which is also only just sort of covering Tasmania. Similar story for Southland. It's in your area, but not necessarily doing anything too big. And by Saturday, as low pressure grows in the southern part of the Tasman Sea and south of us, the northwesterly winds really start to pick up again. So you've got subtropical nor'westers around the North Island, Australian nor'westers for the South Island. Either way, that's a pretty warm day. And it may well be similar to what we had over this past weekend, where we forecast showers, isolated downpours and thunderstorms, and they kind of move into land and they bubble up over land around Waikato, for example, and Bay of Plenty. That is possible here on Saturday with warm sunny spells in the mix as well. But it is windy here on Saturday. That takes us to the first of the wind gust maps. This is 4 o'clock Saturday afternoon. Areas in purple or the darker shading showing those strong winds, which look strongest around Canterbury and going up around Cook Strait, Wellington, Waited Upper area. It doesn't look like it's not the highest of the scale. It's just sort of coming into that wind damage area, but that is possible here on Saturday as those northwesterly winds start to pick up nationwide. By Sunday, the next cold change is arriving thanks to all this low pressure south of New Zealand and another big storm south of Western Australia, 938 hectopascals, that one, and the one south of us, 961. There's another low here over the Auckland Islands. So with all this low pressure south of us and the strong high to our northeast, puts the squash zone right over the top of New Zealand. So very windy on Sunday. Now again, a week out almost. Some of this could move around a wee bit. The winds might be worse in some spots or ease back in others. But overall, you can kind of see this weekend, the windy weather comes through. The subtropical portion of it starting to disappear. And now we're getting more of a polar airflow from down around Antarctica moving in. So this is worth monitoring for those of you, especially in the southern half of the South Island, as we go into the end of this coming weekend and the start of next week. And we've got another wind map as well for Sunday, showing more of those windy west to northwest winds going up the South Island and along the eastern side of the North Island. It's not too bad over in Taranaki. I mean, it'll be windy off the sea, but not problematic. No power cuts, not that sort of stuff. But on the eastern side, as it comes over the mountains and ranges, that is something worth keeping an eye on. Okay, before I go, the next 7 days rainfall also looks like classic spring, with it piling up along the west coast. That is where we're seeing the biggest totals, over 200 millimetres potentially there. And on the eastern side, in the pink, very little rain, maybe none for some of you, as the windy westerly weather continues on. And in the North Island, I know around Taranaki you're a bit over the rain. Sorry to say, you've got more on the way. It fades out as you go further up into Waikato, Hauraki area. You'll be happy about that, I'm sure. And not too much in the way of rainfall for the very top of the North Island. So very much westerly driven, focused on where it should be, over in Westland and especially the southern half heading down towards Fiordland. Thank you for joining me for today's update. I'll be back again tomorrow Tuesday as we take another look at the windy westerly weather on the way.